Hello and welcome. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Goa Chief Minister Manohar Parrikar passed away at the age of 63 on Sunday, March 17, 2019, leaving behind a rich legacy. A few months before his death, almost a dozen clerics reached the BJP headquarters in the state to read the Quran for him. Goa's Archbishop Philippe Neri Ferrao also appealed to the Catholic community to pray for his recovery. Such was the love and adoration for him. Parrikar, who died battling pancreatic cancer, served Goa till his last breath. One of the tallest leaders of Goa, he served as the Chief Minister for the state 4 times. An unconventional leader, Parrikar believed in simplicity and humbleness. Till the end, he resided at his private residence 13 kilometers from Panaji instead of staying at a government bungalow. Even as the Chief Minister, he carried himself with utmost respect and humility. But that is not the only reason people will remember him for. Manohar Parrikar's role as Defence Minister, though for a short period of just 3 years, was memorable as he played a key role in planning the 2016 surgical strike against terror launch pads in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will look back at the life and times of Manohar Parrikar. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Tandon, senior journalist, Ajay Banerjee, defence correspondent of the Tribune, and Shekhar Iyer, senior journalist as well. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Tandon, I'd like to begin with you. Before we talk about the legacy, his political journey, his political achievements, his achievements as a defence minister, let's talk about the kind of human being he was, known for his humility and simple nature.
No, before that, I would like to say that the kind of void he has left in the politics of Goa particularly will be very difficult to fill, because he was an acceptable face across the party lines, and that was one of the reasons why BJP was forced to send him to Goa to cobble together a coalition, and that was because of the his life which the people of Goa had witnessed over the last 3 decades. See, he entered politics in 1988. And IIT graduate, even today people believe that the IITians will never enter politics, and he entered politics in first time he won assembly election in 94. But he made a mark when he literally staged a coup and toppled the Congress government in Goa in 2000 without indulging in any kind of horse trading, and that was the mark which he left on the politics of Goa, which has always been a turbulent state. But he tried to give stability to the Goan politics, 4 times Chief Minister, but unfortunately Goa with 40 seats in the assembly could not get a very stable government. But coming back to his lifestyle, from day one, see, under the influence of the RSS, which has always preached simplicity in public life, he followed it in letter and spirit. Throughout his life, everybody knew him as the man next door. And therefore, he became popular. Very small state, Goa, very difficult to hide anything. And that was the mark which he left on the public life, which I think politicians across party line must follow, and that's why I said the void which he has left, apart from the legacy of simplicity and dedication, all the time thinking about the development of Goa, irrespective of the religion or caste or creed. And that was one of the reasons why first time in Goa BJP could get Christians elected, and they were the people who would say no, only Parrikar is acceptable to us. So all that made a lot of difference in the politics of Goa and also in the life of the BJP, because he was the first at the Goa BJP National Executive when he proposed the name of Narendra Modi as the young new generation prime ministerial candidate. And so he had his understanding of the politics at the national level as well. Later on, as you said, he made a mark as defence minister.
Right.
But one thing I would like to mention here is, when he was leaving Delhi as defence minister, going back to Goa as chief minister, his last words was, I have, as defence minister, the debt which people of Goa had because the Indian armed forces had liberated Goa from Portuguese, so that debt I have repaid on behalf of the people of Goa to the armed forces in Delhi as defence minister. Very touching remarks he made. all the time love of the people of Goa and development of Goa in his heart.
Right.
Such a wonderful person.
Yeah. You know, right to the end, Shekhar Iyer, he served the state, he served the people. He could have taken rest, he could have stepped back and said, no, I want proper medical care, and stepped away from his office. But, you know, with those pipes coming out of his nose, we saw all those pictures on national television. He decided to work till the end. What does it say about the person?
Well, he was an unusual politician. I mean, you seldom get such people who are in politics, but yet not fully seeped in politics. For him, politics was a way of serving people, and it had a lot to do with his own upbringing and the way he started his life in a small village near Mapusa in North Goa. And throughout his career, I mean, whether it was in IIT, today we have heard accounts of how his first debut in politics, if one can say in student politics, was when he was one of the mess secretaries of IIT hostels in Powai, Bombay, and where there was some issue about snacks being served in the hostel, and because they were constantly getting that aloo bonda, which the students were fed up. So he fought for their rights and said, why not go for a sabudana bada? So, you know, that's how he was more into it. And we have seen his 2 years junior, Sudhindra Kulkarni, who served as secretary to Prime Minister Vajpayee. He has recounted how, though, you know, Parikar was totally a committed RSS person, and Sudhindra Kulkarni then was a Marxist. Despite ideological differences, they had some of the best of friendship, which goes to show, as Mr. Ashok Tandon pointed out, that in a place like Goa, despite being an RSS person or a person who has grew in the RSS way, he could somehow, you know, get into dialogue, get into samvad with different sections of the people. And we saw when he was very sick, when he was undergoing treatment, prayers were organized in churches and mosques besides temples. And he brought two things, I would say, to Goa, which is very important to note. One, he brought stability to the politics of Goa, because no matter which party had numbers, there was constantly this Ayaram Gayaram factor, even during the good years of Congress, because always there were smaller parties who would play. But he brought about a great amount of stability in all the stints he had as chief minister. And the second thing is, he managed to keep that life as a simple person. I mean, our pictures of him are riding on a scooter, even as a CM, or standing in the queue at the Indira Gandhi airport terminal, waiting for his turn, getting his boarding pass, boarding the bus like every other passenger, taking the normal service aircraft. You know, these are the images. And apart from that, in most of these functions, he would appear in the thick of Delhi summer. He would appear in a bush shirt and with trousers and a pair of sandals, which normally you and I would do, not trapped by what is called the ministerial paraphernalia. Of course, in the defense, there were occasions where he had to wear the bandkola coat, and he would often feel uncomfortable. Uncomfortable not because of the particular, the clothes he had to wear, but the fact that entailed a lot of ceremonial things which he felt did not suit him. But as a defense minister, he has left behind a legacy which you just mentioned. The way he implemented one rank, one pension, which was a thing which was hanging on fire. Given his IIT kind of background, he was able to do those number crunching in terms of cost, in terms of finding the right resources for that. And the second thing, he changed India's response entire in terms of paradigm in the way to tackle cross-border terrorism, because you saw the first surgical strike, the magnitude of which set the stage for Balakot, actually, I would say, which we saw soon after the Pulwama attack. Therefore, as a defense minister, he played the role of, I would say, a bridge between the defense bureaucracy and the armed forces. Right. So that has been a problem, in the sense there is also constant feeling that bureaucracy doesn't understand the problems of armed forces, and the armed forces have been quite aspirated by the way the bureaucracy functions in the ministry. But he acted as a bridge, whether it was one rank, one pension, or weapons upgrade, or arms acquisition, or the manner in which he conducted Defense Acquisition Council meetings, all go to show that he completely changed the rules of the game in the way decisions are taken, way the decisions are arrived at, and the way we get to prepare and upgrade India's capability in tackling the external dangers.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ajay Banerjee, what was the feeling amongst, the defense journalist fraternity when the decision was made that Manohar Parrikar had to go back to Goa and not remain as the defense minister in Delhi?
I think, see, no offense meant to Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman. She's a very intelligent lady, but defense is a very complicated subject. And naturally, Mr. Parrikar, when he went, there was a small gap because it took some time to Mrs. Sitharaman to get those subjects into place and get understanding of those subjects. Now, she's a very competent minister. However, when Mr. Parrikar went, we all thought that the BJP had taken a wrong decision of sending him to Goa, because had he continued as defense minister, that 6 or 7 months of gap which came in between would have been bridged and a lot of things would move forward. Now, why I say this, see, Mr. Parrikar set the stage for the next, I would say he prepared a blueprint for the next future Indian Army or the Indian Air Force. All the decisions which we see now being taken about restructuring, importantly, restructuring is very, very important issue, because people miss out that restructuring is the thing, because the armies over the world are cutting down the numbers. Mr. Parrikar brought in this idea of cutting down the numbers. I will recall an anecdote. See what happened. Mr. Parrikar joined on 8th or 9th of November 2014 as the defense minister. He met defense correspondents a month later over an evening in Kota House in, close by, a naval facility in Kota House. Now, in that month, we all were surprised. Now, that spoke of his grasp over matters. He had the nitty-gritty of complex issues like the MOD should not have should not file more litigation on pensioners. Very details. And MOD should look at more Sukhois. Rafale, what was going on, everything latest. He knew what was the problems in the MOD. He knew people were taking slow decisions. He was well aware that the MOD had not been recast or restructured since the British left us in 1947. The things were going like that only. And please keep in mind, during British times, the Ministry of Defence was a very, very important ministry. It was the ruling arm of the British. So the MOD had not been recast. So Mr. Parrikar said about recasting it. Those things will be his legacy, I would think, in South Block. And also importantly, Mr. Parrikar was a man who knew what he was talking, as the two panelists have brought out. He was also very humble, and unlike the other defense ministers I have seen in the past decade and a half, he would be very, very informal. And I remember one afternoon I was sitting in his office. He says in Hindi, OROP to de denge hum log, like we would give the OROP. So he was like open to accepting all suggestions. He met these protesters, made them sit in his office, had a long meeting with them, told the secretaries to talk over to them. But I personally believe that his going away yesterday in Goa, his death in Goa, has caused a serious void. We all were expecting him back as the defense minister if the BJP comes to power again.
All right, all right. Terrible void left in Goa politics. Where does this leave the politics of Goa going forward, Mr. Tanda?
See, when he was preparing to go back to Goa in 2017, and the Prime Minister was informed about it, and that's what we later came to know, PM was surprised. A person who is the defense minister of the country wants to go back to a small state like Goa. And Parrikar's reply was, well, my heart is in Goa and I want to serve the people of Goa. So I have no regret in going back to Goa as chief minister. So politics of Goa has always been turbulent, as we all know, and it still is turbulent. Even today, a lot of issues are being debated in Goa, whether who will be the next chief minister. But one thing is clear, that in 2017, after the February election, when hung assembly was returned and BJP was in minority, and of course nobody got the majority, but Congress was the single largest party. And then the question arose whether a BJP government supported by the regional parties could be installed. And those who are on the periphery said, well, if Mr. Parrikar is the chief minister, well, we can support him. And that's how, in fact, the BJP was forced to take a decision. And Mr. Parrikar was more than willing to go there and serve the people. And that is how, as Shekhar has said, in the last couple of years, he provided stability. Even in a hung assembly, Parrikar provided political stability in Goa just because he was the chief minister. All smaller parties, many independents, and across the Goan culture which we see, he was acceptable to everybody, and that's a very remarkable thing. not only just because Goa is a small state, but he set an example. Why can't we do the same thing in the rest of the country? And if he could be the symbol of unity, symbol of harmony, and liberal also, and everybody knows that Goa is a liberal society, and he was dealing with that liberal society and advocating that. And he was not a very hardcore kind of Hindu, and his definition of Hindutva is that the people of Goa and people of India are Hindu by culture. I am not forcing anybody to accept any religion. But that was the philosophy which he preached, and I think it's a great loss. Particularly the people of Goa will never forget him, and that void, I think, is very, very difficult to fulfill.
You know, that having been said, Shekhar Iyer, you know, on the one spectrum, on the one hand of the spectrum, he held or handled the defense portfolio. On the other, in between the chief minister, on the other end, advocating culture, advocating films. We saw what a big role he played in bringing IFFI to Goa and ensuring that it was kept there as well. So, you know, a wide spectrum really, if you look at it from that perspective, defense to movies, to the chief minister and everything in between.
Yes, indeed. He was a man of varied experience and varied talents. And I think he always had Goa in mind, because beyond the sun and sand, which we, rest of India, associate Goa with, there were some very genuine problems in Goa, which is, you know, after the mining was stopped by the Supreme Court, unemployment has been a very big issue there. And tourism is seasonal. You know, there are two phases. There is a brief tourism during the monsoon season when people go there to watch rains. And the bulk of the tourism period is between, say, October, November till January. Rest of the year, there is not much of a scope for livelihood for others. So therefore, he was always looking at ways to attract investment to Goa, to have industries which are eco-friendly, because of, you know, the Supreme Court was very firm about on mining issue. So Goa has been struggling to, you know, get on its feet, particularly after the ban on mining. So he was involved in chalking out schemes, way to start industries, get IT industry in Goa, you know, those industries that do not affect environment. So there was a big challenge on his mind. That is something that was always on his. And other thing was, if tourism was the only money spinner for Goa, how to create world-class facilities. So that saw him getting involved in constructing new bridges, better connectivity, broadening the highways. And I remember when I went to cover a BJP national convention in Goa, and he had taken over in 2000. And I remember in 2001, 2002, as soon as he got out of the airport, the first thing he did was, the first impressions anyone had of Goa was the beautiful highway from the airport, from the Dublin airport, into the interiors of Goa through broadening that highway past that Indian oil refinery, where they have the oil storage, and then into one going to North Goa and other to the South Goa. So he did a lot to create that infrastructure, finally led to Goa earning a top spot among the world's best destinations for tourism. Now that is the kind of vision he had for Goa. That's why you saw him the other day, despite with his tube sticking out, going to see the progress of work on construction of a bridge over River Mondavi, or going to see what has happened to a second or a third bridge on the River Zuari. So he was involved into all that because he felt Goa needed to create these infrastructure on the basis of which it would be able to attract investment, and Goa had to look for other than tourism, because tourism was there and perhaps it could go on be exploited, but more need to be done for Goa. That was always on his mind. And other parties, particularly when we saw Goa elections through a hung assembly, the fact that the smaller parties were willing to support his leadership was because of his vision, his ideas, which they felt ultimately every party, the big party or the small party, have to go back to the people. And the big question there is unemployment, water, land use. Now these are the issues that are best served when you have a very effective chief minister and you have a good governance model. So therefore Parikar's role in Goa was not just about balancing people, but it was all, various sections of people, but was also to see that good governance resulted in a progress and development of the state, because our understanding Goa is all about the green, but beyond the green, there are very grave issues affecting different sections of society there. And to which those issues, Parikar was always in search of an effective solution.
So it was not just about the superficial, but it was about, you know, the real issues on the ground and going deep and trying and handling those issues and ensuring that, you know, a better Goa and a prosperous Goa is created. Ajay Banerjee, as far as his role as defense minister is concerned, you know, surgical strike, OROP apart, what else really stood out and stands out for you, and what is it that you will always remember him by?
Critically, Mr. Parikar balanced India's military relations with Russia, China and the US. He knew where to stop all three of them. He knew how to engage them, and he knew when it was not enough and when more need to be done, when it was need to be stopped. For example, there was a press conference going on South Block. US Defense Secretary Ashton Carter was here, and we were signing the Logistics Exchange Memorandum Agreement with the US. Very important thing which had been held up for more than 10 years. And Mr. Parikar had a very hard bargain, drove a very hard bargain with the US. As it was being announced, Mr. Parikar himself spoke out of turn and said, this gentleman does not mean that there will be US troops stationed in India. Now, please understand, it is a very important statement, because everybody thought the Logistics Exchange Memorandum Agreement would mean that the US troops could be stationed like they are in Australia or in Japan, elsewhere, or in Philippines. So he made it clear that US troops cannot be stationed here. One, and secondly, with China, he was very clear what more to do with China, what not to do with China. And with Russia also, I remember during his tenure that we re-engaged with Russia. There was a kind of decline with Indo-Russian military relations. He re-engaged with them and critically got the Russian companies to come to India and talk to Indian manufacturers to make spare parts for Russian equipment and weapons to be made in India. Now, you get an equipment from Russia, but how do you get the spare parts? The Russian companies are, it's a behemoth. So he got those companies to India, got to talk to them in Indian MSME and SME sectors to make those smaller components for each of these weapons and equipments. Now they are being made, and you can see in the past 6 months we have signed a new plan to set up a rifle, AK-203 in Amethi. We have brought 4 new Grigorovich class frigates. We have signed an agreement to have the new Akula class nuclear submarine. And also critically, we have signed the agreement during Mr. Parikar's time to make joint venture to make helicopters, the Kamav 226. All these things have been done Mr. Parikar's time, and later, they all started during Mr. Parikar's time. Later in October last year, we again signed the agreement for the S-400 missiles. So this is a huge shift towards Russia. I will not say Mr. Parikar did it, conscious decision of the country, but Mr. Parikar had a key role to play in this. Now, with regards to China, he was very categorical where the boundary dispute is with China and where do we stop and how do we go about it. He was very clear about it, though he never spoke much on it publicly, but personally he used to tell us that, see, this is a dispute which will take long to resolve. One, which is a fact, all of us know that, the country agrees on that. And this is a dispute, well, best kept there at this time and dealt with it locally. Mr. Parikar, I would remember him for his efforts with regard to the balancing of the ties. We did not tilt towards the US, we didn't tilt towards the Russians, and we kept China at bay. This is how I remember him.
Defense is at the end of the day a very critical part of diplomacy as well, so that was handled very well is what you're suggesting. Quick closing comments from all my guests, starting first with you, Mr. Tandon, about the fondest memories that you have of Mr. Parikar and what is it that he leaves behind with you?
I think a proud son of India who was nationalist to the core, always unity, integrity and sovereignty of the country in his mind, dedicated person, selfless, self-made also, and who had Goa and the people of Goa and the welfare of Goa and development of Goa in his heart, and that was his mission which he accomplished very successfully, and the people of Goa will always remember him and salute that great son of Goa.
Shekhar Iyer?
Well, I think the most enduring picture for me would be his giving up his seat in that Air India bus for a lady who had just got in from the terminal building to reach the aircraft. He immediately got up and stood like anyone else holding his own bag. Of course, there were Air India officers who were trying to help me. He said, no, just relax, just take care of this lady. I think that's the way all politicians should be.
Close the show for us, Ajay Banerjee.
Frank, Mr. Parikar cannot be summed up in few sentences, but I would say that it's a loss to the nation. He has laid the blueprint for a modern Ministry of Defence. Not that the previous RMs or the now RM is not doing it. All of them have been very competent. Ministry of Defence is a continuous process. Mr. Parikar played a very key role in that continuous process. I can say that with conviction, Frank.
A void has been left behind as far as Goa politics and national politics is concerned, but all things have to come to an end. We'll have to thank Manohar Parikar for all the work that he has done for Goa and the nation as well. The nation mourns the loss of a son. With that, it's a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program. See you again next time.